So crowd theory is what this project in Adelaide is about. What is it? You kept mentioning at the shoot that we did last week that participants need to hold one thought and the camera will know what you were thinking. What is all of that about, and the whole theory of crowd theory, what is it about from your perspective?
It's a project that I started in 2004, and on and off I've been sort of dipping into it again since then. But there are two sort of main aspects to it. One is in that way that I came to photography and was there's something about the crowd that, first of all, that I'm very interested in, and the chance, spontaneous nature of a crowd that, in a sense, the ultimate kind of social space. The one social space where those barriers between people break down and the more fluid, fleeting sort of encounters happen. This in the sort of terms of how Freud talked about crowds, how Elias Canetti in his book Crowds and Power spoke about the crowd. And so there's something sort of really utopic about that idea of a way of human gathering against all those other ideas of groups, communities, and sort of fixed nature of things. So that is a very basic part of this, and what I tried to do with this crowd theory project is pick sites and then invite as many people as I possibly can who have some kind of attachment with that site to gather there, and in that way make a portrait of a site, a place, and embark on some kind of extraction of the idea of place and people's relationship.
So how did you come upon this form of art? What inspired you to get up on 40-foot scaffolding and do projects like this? I mean, how did you come upon it?
Well, it really came about as a solution to a problem. I was just having a problem with works I'd been making prior to 2004 that I was increasingly frustrated about putting on sort of installations, things like that. Then before that I'd had a life in theatre, and the same with that, doing a show and then there's nothing left, and I would always feel bereft and lost afterwards. And so it just became apparent that construct the event around making the picture, not make a picture of the event. But they both play into each other, but essentially to undertake something like this and have a result is just a way of, in a sense, keeping it. That's really how it came about. I was offered, it was with a woman named Gerald Rector, who was the director of the Footscray Art Centre at the time, and neither of us knew what to do, but there was just an idea of, let's do something with this. Let's some kind of event, and I had no idea. And after a few months of sort of fishing around, it became apparent that this would be a way to do it, and it sort of converged with other things that were bothering me at the time as well. Yeah.
So Victoria Square, how did this project arise, and why Victoria Square?
It came about because Susan Jenkins, the curator here at the Samstag Museum, approached me about 3 years ago, and we started a conversation. She was in a different role at the time. Started talking. She just thought, to see if she'd bring me over here to do one of these projects. Then that trailed off just because of circumstances, and then started again about a year ago. And so it was entirely her. She instigated it, and then I came in August, and with the idea of, yes, let's try and do something in Adelaide, but with no idea where or how or when exactly. But so we spent 10 days looking for sites and just sort of feeling out what might be possible. And it very quickly became apparent to me that Victoria Square, it had to be that most exciting place for a number of reasons. And I guess one of the first reasons is back to that sort of stage set idea. There's this kind of fabulous backdrop to that view we have of Victoria Square, where with the town hall and the treasury as one lower layer of buildings, and then progressively up and up and up to sort of banks, and it just forms a classic proscenium view of the city. And then the square itself, just finding out more and more about the history of that square and its significance from, there's things like the first place the Aboriginal flag was flown, in 1972 it was, I think, 71, 72, and to, you know, the beginning point of and staging posts for marches and rallies and all sorts of other things, and controversial legislation around it becoming a dry zone and all of this. So it's kind of got these fantastic layers, but it's also a space of people. There's an ambivalence too, because it seems like, has it ever worked? And all these sorts of questions. So it's got and being the centre of the city, it's just got those sorts of focuses. But it worked in staging terms first. That was the first thing. And then, as I got to know it better, it works in terms of that idea of so many diverse people from so many areas having a relationship with it. Someone did ring me the day before the shoot and said, "What are you doing? Now, which side of the fence do you sit on regarding the politics for this square?" Etc., etc., etc. And really quite heated about, you know, and that I think that's as good a pointer as any of, you know, when people chose to care about that square, they do care.
I was surprised, and I'll just get your reflection on this, that most of your other works involved a relatively finite group of people that have been invited. In this occasion, either tower blocks or particular districts or art crowds or whatever. This occasion you invited all of Adelaide, and yet, effectively, and that's where the invitation was sort of headed out, but effectively at the end of the day, kind of exactly the same number of people who turn up in your other images turned up for this one. Was that a surprise to you, or a relief? You were afraid you were going to get 40 or 4,000, or?
I didn't ever think that would happen, but no, it's just weird. I can't explain that. No idea why. Why is it similar to the others? Because, yeah, as you say, there was only the most basic filter. You know, do you have a connection with the square? Everyone does. But it's bizarre that it's similar. Yeah, I did have fears of like 1,000 people turning up. That would have been something quite different.
And the impact of the transformation of Victoria Square at the time you took it, it was literally its last hours, days, as it's currently as it's been for, what is it now, 50 years since the fountain was built.
Yeah.
What impact did that have on either the concept or the image at the end of the day? Not the transformation as well as the fact that the fountain wasn't flowing and things like that.
Yeah, well, I should say from the earliest discussions in August, that was the idea that we would get there just after the first stage, what's called the public realm, was taken out. Street lighting, electricity, some aspect of the fountain. We didn't know what to the last minute, really, but that was a very important part of it. And I guess the way the photograph plays to that moment of transition, because it just added another significant layer to it, because even from now the square is forever changed. So it marks a moment in time, and it does that basic thing of the photograph as a death mask of a moment. So that aspect of it is important.
When people come to visit this image, what should they be looking for? What impacts do you think it will have on people?
Well, there are two answers. One, it's probably not the most useful, but it's sort of, I do subscribe to that thing that, in a sense, my job's done at a certain point, and then it is whatever anyone brings to it. But what I would hope with that would be interesting of people who are in the image is one layer, and then people who just know Adelaide is another layer of reading, and then beyond Adelaide, where it becomes just, a public square being kind of being occupied, something, an extraction of the idea of what a public square can hold.
Do you sometimes get amazed at what people do? I mean, I was there, and I was amazed at people, at least given some of their ages, what they were doing. Does that surprise you sometimes?
Yeah, always. I think this well, we'll see what, but whether you'll think it's a particularly Adelaide response, I think so. But it had a high level of performance. And I was just astonished, astounded. Didn't expect a lot of that. Although sometimes people do it, but what I found in this one, there were some people who were really clever. They knew how to behave for a long exposure. There's, in one of the negatives, there's a man who's perfectly put himself in 4 spots. So he's translucent and that's sharp, and in these 4 spots. So there was quite a good calculation that he must have made to know how to do that.
Well, Simon, thanks for your time. We look forward to seeing the work when it opens at the Samstag in May, and wish you well, and thanks very much for being a part of for this interview and contributing to Adelaide.
No, thank you.
Good.
Pleasure.
Thanks.